How's it going, my friends? It's Carpo here. Better make sure the camera is actually going. Got this crappy old camera. It's difficult to know if it's even working sometimes. That's kind of the way that things go. Things fall apart, and I suppose that's a good introduction to where I'm going with this video. It's that life is ever changing, and that for the most part we open the door. It's a little warm in here. We measly humans really try to embrace it as best we can, and to handle the complexities of being human to the best of our abilities. And there's not much else you can say about it. We create religions and science and religion and politics and all these different ways to try to understand, to handle, to cope with the world around us. And sometimes it ends up being a useful tool, and sometimes the things that we know to be the normal things in life, what we consider to be the norm, it's very difficult to distinguish between those which we've been programmed with through just our upbringing, and which ones are like these inherent realities that we should follow, like don't harm others, following basic rules, being responsible, being respectful. Those are very subjective things, and I think being responsible is a perfect example of kind of where I'm going with this video. I've just been thinking about all the things that I have to do in my life, the things that bother me, that I know I need to do, that are nagging at the back of my mind. And a lot of people say, well, if you have things that you need to get done, you just do it. And it's not quite so easy. Sometimes you become overwhelmed in life, and it's very difficult to know which things to tackle. And it's even harder when you're not really bothered by them. And a good example would be, let's say you have a bunch of obligations to do something that you don't want to do, such as pay bills. You have to do it. You'll force yourself to do it, and in the end you'll say, I'm glad I did. Why didn't I do that sooner? But it doesn't mean that you'll just learn to do it sooner. I feel this way about so many things in life, that there are some people who are just they're very organized. Their lives are very organized and clean and simple. Everything's paid on time. Everything's done. The accounts, down to the penny. Everybody knows exactly what they're doing, and their whole life is based around this financial aspect to life, which is where we've gone as a society right now, into this financial aspect. You're forced to become part of the world. I should say, let me try to rephrase this. We're basically forced or obligated to get a job and to make a living, even if we hate money, even if we despise the way that the system works. We're forced into it and obligated to do it, or else we end up being, we can keep our values and our morals and then be broke all the time. It doesn't. Some people have turned money into such an important thing that they're willing to harm others to get it, that they're willing to take from others to get it. And that's just simple theft. But it's also embezzlement. It's running stocks. If you're lying about investments you're making, if you have insider information. I mean, basically, insider trading is theft from the people, from the stockholders. But then there's that element of, you chose to buy stocks. You're taking a risk. It's like gambling, like anything. It's hard to feel sorry for somebody who invested billions of dollars. Say, for example, Bernie Madoff. I watched that documentary the other day. It was actually pretty good. My wife turned it on, and I wouldn't have ever turned anything on like that by myself. But it kind of shows the mentality of a person who can convince others that they have all this money that they don't really have. People trust individuals way too much, and don't have enough faith in themselves and what they believe to be true. And this is kind of the leader-follower issue that we have as being human. But anyhow, back to the money thing. Being forced into this system, it doesn't mean that you have to take advantage of others, making a steady profit, or maybe getting a better deal on something. Whatever you do for a living, what's really important is that what we do is somewhat helping people, helping the environment, helping the world that we live in. I don't just mean, green or energies, that I just mean helping the environment. The environment to me is everything around us. I gotta make sure this camera is still going, because sometimes it dies. Sorry about that. So yeah, for me the environment's everything, and what's important is that we're helping to improve the lives of those around us and our own. But I wanted to talk about the church in a separate video, but I thought I'd just mention it here. It's like the Catholic Church, which was supposedly, and this isn't. This is basically about how a group of people who believe that they have superior knowledge or divine authority can convince themselves that owning one of the greatest fortunes in the world, billions of dollars in residences and properties and solid gold and everything else that the Vatican has. A lot of people say, well, how can you have all these great things while people are starving? In other words, why doesn't the Catholic Church take all that money and put it into programs which they know now will help people, even if it bankrupts the church? In the long run, they can't see that happening. It's just, people need help, and there's a church which is based on a man, Jesus, who said that to help the poor is the most, the greatest thing. But we have them building these giant palaces, and deep within the church, there's the element of basically everything that the church is supposed to stand against, which is, for example, pedophilia. I don't even want to bring that one up, but a lot of people talk about how these satanic groups of people meet and they have these pedophile rings. There's pedophilia in all walks of life, in all beliefs, in all creeds, religions, cultures. And to me it's disgusting, and to most people it's disgusting. But to those who approve of it, those who think it's okay, especially within the church, they will tell the kids or the children, hey, if you go and tell on us, then it will damn your soul, that you will be, the one who's guilty, So people hide these things their entire lives, and it ruins the whole outlook of a person that they have on life. It can go down the lineage and affect their children and their children. And this is all coming from an organization that is supposedly, there to help people. And I use that as an example to show how, no matter how benign or how good intent supposedly an organization is, in the end there are always people who are going to take advantage. And all the others who are trapped in that, will be, I should say, all the other people who are associated with that will be blamed. My point being, there could be a great priest out there who's doing great things, and it bothers him that he's associated with the church that has had so many problems. And people do pick out the problems. They tend to always see the negative in things. The same way with cops. It's very hard not to think that police are just out of control and out there shooting people all the time that they shouldn't be shooting. I believe that in the United States of America, in my country, the police are out of hand. We have small towns that are getting armored vehicles and assault weapons and wearing riot gear in order to stop peaceful protests. This is authoritarianism. This is where our country is headed. It's, you'd have to be blind not to see it. But the question is, do we still have control? Can we still create change that's impactful enough to actually change anything? Or do we just, are we just given enough to pretend like we've changed a few laws and pretend like that we're improving the world, and meanwhile the corrupt machine goes on? Well, the corrupt machine will always go on. That's one of the things about being human, is just like I have the freedom to speak against what I feel to be wrong and to gain the things in life I find to be a right, I have no right to tell somebody that they can't go out and become a billionaire, or that they shouldn't go out and be greedy and selfish and build giant mansions. I have nothing against money, because money is nothing. Money doesn't exist. It's a promissory note. What really matters is the resources. How are the resources that this world has being used, and how are we all to blame for some of the damage that's being done, but also how do we all have a part to play in how to improve this world? We feel like we don't have control. And this kind of goes back to, the beginning when I was saying sometimes we have a lot going on in our own lives, and it makes it feel overwhelming. Well, when we have a lot going on in our own lives and we're distracted by all these things, such as how we're going to get the money to pay the next bill, the last thing people are going to do is have the energy to go out and fight against corruption or tyranny. And the people with the most time on their hands tend to be the ones who see the most problems, because when we have problems in our lives, we tend to point out and see flaws in others, we see flaws in the system, and pretty soon people start feeling like they're trapped, and they become very resentful towards the world we live in, and say, don't you know you're living in an illusion? Don't you know that everything around you is faked, that the whole system is set up in order to impoverish and create a false paradigm for the poor to live in, so we can continue to support the machine as slave labor? Of course I can see all of this, but I don't give them the power. I don't give the few people who are trying to dominate the world the power to think that they have the power. In other words, when people talk about the U.S. government turning the armies or turning its own military on its own people, and during a major disaster, or maybe there's a major revolution in this country, there are just as many people out there in this country who are in the military or in the service who don't support the paradigm and who would jump at the chance to march alongside people who were having a revolution or a protest. But the problem these days, it's not about how much we protest, or we don't have a common goal. We don't have a common interest. The reason why I mentioned the environment and why I brought up the Vatican is because the Vatican, in their billions, they have some of the largest investments put into coal and oil industries. And so there was a controversy surrounding that, and people were saying, well, now we have a pope in there who believes that the climate is changing, who believes that we are contributing to this climate change, regardless of what people believe. If the Pope believes this, and their own church is invested in oil and coal, and especially in the U.S., the idea is, if you really see a future where we can move to green energy, then when that happens, the value of coal and oil will plummet. Of course, this is just a pipe dream. Let's just say theoretically. So in that case, those stocks might not even be worth having. Money does no good if it's invested in things that are destroying ourselves. It's just like if you get rich and you can finally afford cocaine, so you become a coke addict and snort yourself to nothing. This is a very blatant and simple metaphor. I mean, cocaine is a perfect example for what we've done as a nation, and many different nations, and as a world, and as groups and collectives, to look past the small things that we sacrifice, the small values that we sacrifice, and say, well, in the bigger picture, it's okay, because my group is actually helping to improve the world. So if a few people have to die, casualty. If the environment has to suffer a little, it'll pass. And perhaps in some cases that's true, but I just like to say that using groupthink and relying on what the group thinks and what other people are saying, it's never going to serve us well. It's important that we look at what other people say and that we research these facts that people are presenting, because otherwise we can only take a guess as to where the earth is flat or round. I mean, I don't even get into that argument anymore. It's preposterous to me that these people actually spend time trying to prove that the earth is flat. Beyond all this science, all they'll say is, well, you've just been told the earth is round. It's another perfect metaphor for what's going on right now. Information overload in the world is allowing people to say nothing is true unless I want it to be. Confirmation bias, selective reasoning. And to step away from all of that, to stop trying to prove ourselves in these little ways that, our group knows the earth's flat, or this group knows and understands which religion is correct. To come together and actually try to find common ground And that's the problem. That's why democracy doesn't work. That's why our current system and everything is falling apart. The world's falling apart. It's not because we're too dumb. It's because we're too ignorant, which is a huge difference. We're ignoring the facts because we don't want to hear them a lot of the time. But it all comes down to the individual and your perspective and what you think is important. I have to derive my own conclusions from life. The one thing I've learned is to not waste much time in debating and arguing. If somebody wants to present facts to contradict something, let's say, and you don't want to look at them, a person would say, well, you're being ignorant and you're purposely ignoring these facts. But let's say it's about a subject. They want to tell you that, for example, flat earth, I guess, is a good example for that. They'll say, but you're not looking at this evidence and this evidence. And I say, wait, look at the big picture. This doesn't affect me. I'm trying to live my life. I can barely even, I don't even know my own town, let alone, am I going to go out and sail the seas to see if there's a wall around the earth, or if I'm going to believe that there's a dome and the heavens above and that the sun is 30,000 feet up, whatever it might be. Sometimes it's not worth wasting time. And too many people are wasting time on very trivial things that aren't going to actually improve their lives to know or to prove, if that makes sense. And that's, of course, not to offend anyone out there who studies conspiracies. If that's your thing, so be it. I would just say I've been in that mindset where I wanted to show how corrupt the world was. And now I'm aware of it. Yes, I know that money is a joke, that false flag attacks have happened, that there's fiat money systems set up, Jekyll Island, the Federal Reserve is a separate company, that nothing really exists, and that a lot of these things are an illusion. But not everything is an illusion. There isn't, regardless of whether I exist or I don't, this consciousness wakes up every morning and has to deal with this world. So I can fight against money, I can fight against all these problems in the world, but in the end, at the end of the day, it's about what have I done with my own life, and how much have I improved my life and those around me. And I think that's crucial for us all to remember, because the deeper we go into trying to understand things and prove things, the harder it becomes. There are certain things that don't need defense, and one of those is the fact that each person has their own drive and their own experience, and it's that word sonder, the realization that everyone else has a life similar to your own, and that they're not all just actors in your play. That's kind of the reality that a lot of people live, that, they're the only one that matters. It's like, it's hard, but I see more people that care about others, and that's the point. You can always see a sociopath in a group of people who aren't sociopaths, but it doesn't mean that they represent the whole of people. But they're out there. Camera's still going. That's good. So anyway, that's my video for the day. It's a beautiful sunny day out here. I'm going to try to embrace it. Try to get some things done. And my only parting note would be, really embrace the little things that come your way. Embrace the little things that mean so much. Because that's really all there is. We can create our own beliefs about what happens after death or before life. In fact, this morning when I was dropping my son off at school, this idea occurred to me that people that religion, in a way, is death prepping. There's preppers out there who get ready for a catastrophe by stockpiling food and ammunition and everything. And then there are death preppers who hopefully can still enjoy this life enough. Because the more focused we are on, death, the more we miss in this life. Because we're all going to die. Might as well embrace what we've got here.